The city of Glendale was preparing for its most important charity gala of the year, an evening dedicated to raising funds for the Children's Medical Foundation. This was an event that mattered to Marcus Hartley in ways that only a few people in the world could understand. The ballroom of the Glendale Palace Hotel had been transformed into something magical, with crystal chandeliers hanging from soaring ceilings, round tables dressed in white linens and adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces, and servers in tailored black uniforms gliding smoothly between the guests. Outside, the evening air carried the scent of rain that had fallen earlier in the day, and the city lights were beginning to twinkle on the horizon as the sun dipped below the buildings. Earlier that morning, Marcus had woken before dawn, as he always did. His small house on Maple Street was quiet, the kind of quiet that came from a household containing only one adult and one child. He had made coffee, his favorite coffee that he only bought once a month as a small treat, and he had sat on the back porch watching the sun come up over the neighbor's fence. He thought about Susan, about the way she used to wake up early to watch the sunrise with him before Emma was born, about how she would put her head on his shoulder and they would sit in companionable silence, grateful for another day together. Those mornings had ended 3 years ago, but he still remembered them like they were yesterday. After his coffee, he had gone to work. It was a Saturday, but Marcus worked most Saturdays because 1.5 pay was important when you were raising a daughter alone. He had spent his morning on a construction site at the east end of town, framing walls for a new office building. His hands were calloused from years of this work. His back sometimes ached. But the work was honest, and it paid the bills. And more importantly, it had allowed him to fund the Children's Medical Foundation's expansion program without going bankrupt in the process. He had set up the donations in Susan's name, a way of honoring her legacy, a way of ensuring that his wife's gift of caregiving would continue to save children's lives long after she was gone. Around noon, he had picked Emma up from her friend's house where she had spent the morning. They had stopped at the mall, and Emma had tried on the lavender dress about 15 different times before deciding it was the one. "Does it make me look pretty?" she had asked over and over, and he had said yes every time because she was already beautiful in every way that mattered. Now, as the evening arrived, Marcus stood in his truck in the parking lot, his hands resting on the steering wheel, taking a moment before walking inside. He needed this moment to center himself, to remember why he was here, to prepare himself for the evening ahead. The vehicle was old but immaculate, a 1998 Chevy pickup that he had maintained with his own hands for the past 14 years. Every part was cared for, every surface clean, because this truck represented something sacred to him. It was the vehicle that had carried him through his journey of becoming a father, of building a life from nothing, of learning that real wealth had nothing to do with money. His work boots were polished as best they could be, his jeans were clean, and his flannel shirt, worn soft from countless washings, was his nicest. It was blue and gray with a small coffee stain on the left cuff that he had noticed that morning but decided not to worry about. He wore it tonight, as he always did, with the kind of quiet dignity that no designer label could manufacture. In the passenger seat, his daughter Emma sat fidgeting with the small pink backpack on her lap. She was 7 years old, and she had spent the entire day choosing what to wear, asking her father 100 times if she looked pretty enough, if they would have fun, if Mommy would have liked her dress. Marcus had helped her pick out the lavender dress from the department store, helped her get her hair just right in braids with those little purple ribbons she loved so much. Emma was his reason for everything. She was why he worked so hard, why he stayed humble, why he never let the bitterness of the world take root in his heart. "You ready, sweetheart?" Marcus asked, reaching over to gently adjust one of Emma's braids. his weathered fingers surprisingly gentle. "Are there going to be a lot of people?" she asked, her hazel eyes wide and serious, so much like her mother's had been. "A lot of people, yes," he answered, his voice warm and steady. "But remember what Daddy said. We're going to have a good time. We're going to see the beautiful building. And maybe we'll get to have some of that fancy ice cream they mentioned." Emma's face broke into a smile. "Can I have chocolate?" "You can have whatever kind you want," Marcus said. And he meant it with every fiber of his being. He always meant it when he said things like that to his daughter. They didn't have much, but what they had, they shared freely. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. They made their way up the marble steps of the Glendale Palace Hotel, Emma holding tight to her father's hand. Above them, the entrance was framed by tall glass doors, and through them they could see the glitter and glamour of the event in full swing. Other guests were arriving, men in expensive tuxedos, women in stunning evening gowns, the kind of clothes that cost more than Marcus made in a month. The diamonds and pearls caught the light, the designer names whispered between conversations. He didn't feel out of place exactly. He never really felt out of place anywhere. But he was aware of the contrast, aware of how his worn flannel shirt stood out against all those designer labels, aware of how Emma's modest dress from the department store was surrounded by haute couture. "Daddy, it's so pretty," Emma whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "It is, baby, very pretty, but you know what's prettier?" "What?" "You. You're the prettiest thing in this whole room." Emma beamed, squeezing his hand tighter. And in that moment, Marcus knew that he had done the right thing by bringing her here. Whatever happened tonight, this memory of her happiness would be worth it. As they entered through the glass doors, the full scope of the gala became apparent. The ballroom was breathtaking, a testament to wealth and elegance. Soaring ceilings rose above them, crystal chandeliers casting a warm, golden glow over everything. The tables were laden with expensive appetizers, shrimp the size of a man's thumb, caviar on tiny spoons, champagne that cost more than Marcus's monthly mortgage. The orchestra played softly from a stage decorated with white roses and tulle. Emma's grip on his hand tightened in awe, and he smiled down at her, squeezing her hand reassuringly. This was for her. All of this. The discomfort of feeling out of place, the awkwardness of being among people so different from himself. It was all for her. She deserved to see beauty. She deserved to experience things beyond their small house on the edge of town. Marcus was so focused on Emma's wonder that he didn't immediately notice the woman approaching them. She moved with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested authority, the heels of her expensive shoes clicking sharply against the marble floor. Victoria Ashford saw them before they had taken more than a few steps into the main hall. She was the event coordinator, a woman in her late 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair, sharp features, and eyes that assessed people the way a jeweler assesses stones, quickly, coldly, and almost always finding them wanting. She wore a designer black dress, expensive jewelry that caught the light, a Cartier watch, pearl earrings, a diamond necklace that probably cost what Marcus made in a year. Her expression was the kind that came from a lifetime of looking down at people, of never questioning her own assumptions about who belonged and who didn't. Victoria's eyes traveled from Marcus's work boots up to his flannel shirt, lingering there with undisguised disapproval. She did not see a single father who had spent his day working with his hands to provide for his daughter. She did not see a man who had served his country with honor, who had risked his life for strangers. She did not see a man of quiet strength and dignity. She saw someone who did not belong in her carefully orchestrated evening, someone who had made a mistake in entering through the main entrance instead of the service corridor, someone who would need to be redirected, like cattle, toward the proper entrance for people of his station. She walked directly toward him, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, like an executioner's footsteps, her expression, already prepared for the interaction she was certain was about to occur. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying the kind of tone reserved for people she considered beneath her. The temperature of her words was cold enough to frost glass. "I think there's been some confusion. The service entrance is around the side of the building. You'll want to use the back door." Marcus stopped in his tracks. He had heard variations of this kind of thing before, in small ways throughout his life. The security guard who asked for his ID, even when he was clearly a guest at a company event. The woman at the grocery store who assumed he couldn't afford the organic vegetables in his cart. The landlord who had initially refused to rent to a single father, worried he wouldn't be able to maintain the property. The teacher who had suggested Emma might be better served in a special education classroom, without even assessing her academically. He had learned long ago not to let these moments define him. His late wife, Susan, had always told him that the quality of your character wasn't determined by what others thought of you, but by what you knew to be true about yourself. She had been wise that way, even in her final days when the cancer had ravaged her body, but never touched her spirit. He took a breath and looked at the coordinator with kind eyes, the same kind eyes that had comforted his wife in her darkest moments. "I'm actually a guest tonight. We're here to support the foundation. We have invitations." Victoria's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened further, like a wall being constructed in real time. "Well, even so, you'll still want to use the back entrance. It's less crowded that way, better for people in your position." The implication hung in the air between them like a foul odor. People in your position, meaning people who weren't rich enough to matter. People who shouldn't be mingling with the important guests. People who should know their place. Emma tugged at her father's hand, her bright voice rising with innocent confusion. "Daddy, why is that lady being mean? Are we not supposed to be here?" The question hung in the air between them, and Marcus felt his heart break a little bit. Already his 7-year-old daughter was learning that the world made judgments, that sometimes people were unkind without cause, that sometimes the world would try to tell you that you didn't belong simply because of how you looked. He could see the confusion on her small face, the dawning realization that something wasn't right, that something had shifted in the air around them. Victoria didn't even look at Emma, as if the child was beneath her notice. She kept her cold gaze fixed on Marcus, one perfectly manicured hand gesturing dismissively toward the side corridor. "We're exactly where we're supposed to be, sweetheart," Marcus said gently, though he kept his voice low, not wanting to create a scene, not wanting to draw more attention to Emma. "Come on." He started to move Emma toward the side corridor Victoria had indicated, not because he accepted her judgment, but because he knew that making a scene would hurt Emma more than acquiescing would hurt him. He had learned long ago that sometimes the kindest thing you could do for your child was to remove them from an uncomfortable situation, to shield them from cruelty, even if it meant accepting indignity yourself. He had spent years shielding Emma from hurt, ever since her mother passed away. But before he could take more than a few steps, a security guard approached them, his expression sympathetic, but his duty clear. He was a young man, probably in his 20s, and Marcus could see the discomfort in his eyes. He didn't want to do this either, but he had his orders. "Sir, we have protocols about different entrances for different purposes," the guard said quietly. "Let me escort you around the back. It's just the procedure. Nothing personal." Marcus nodded, acknowledging the man's discomfort, trying to make it easier for him. "I understand. Thank you for being respectful about it." Around them, other guests had begun to notice. Whispers rippled through the crowd like waves across water. Women in expensive dresses leaned toward their companions, their eyes fixed on Marcus and Emma, their mouths forming little expressions of disdain or curiosity. A man in a tuxedo raised his eyebrow in that particular way that conveyed judgment, as if this confirmed something he had always suspected about people who dressed like Marcus. One woman near them actually laughed, a short, cruel sound that made Marcus's jaw tighten, though his face remained calm. He could not let Emma see him angry. He could not let her see him broken by this. Emma's hand in his was beginning to tremble. "Come on, baby," Marcus said, his voice soft but steady. He wanted to show her that this moment didn't define them, that dignity was something internal, something that couldn't be taken away by the cruelty of others. He was learning to show her these things in real time, to teach her resilience not through lectures, but through his own example. It was perhaps the most important thing he could teach her. As the security guard began to lead them away, Victoria called out one more time, her voice loud enough that several guests turned to listen. "You know, we have certain standards at these events. Dress codes exist for a reason. They keep things appropriate." The implication was clear, and it was a knife aimed right at Marcus's chest, not because he doubted himself, but because his daughter was watching, learning, absorbing this lesson about how the world treated people who didn't fit the mold. She was learning that there were people who judged you instantly, who deemed you unworthy of kindness before they even knew your name. They were led through the grand ballroom, past tables laden with expensive appetizers and fine wines, past the orchestra on the small stage, and toward the far side of the building, where the service corridors were hidden away from the view of the paying guests. The light here was different, harsher, more industrial. Gone were the soft golden tones of the main hall, replaced by the practical fluorescent lighting of the service areas. Doors for kitchen staff, storage areas, and employee break rooms lined the hallway. This was where people like Marcus were meant to stay, hidden away, their existence acknowledged only when their labor was needed. Emma had stopped asking questions. She had grown quiet, which was perhaps even worse than her confusion had been. She was processing, learning, internalizing, and Marcus hated that. He hated that his daughter was discovering that the world could be unfair, that sometimes people judged you before they even knew you. He had tried so hard to protect her from this knowledge, to keep her in a bubble of innocence and love. But the world had other plans. The back door they were directed to opened into a service alley, partially lit by industrial lighting, lined with dumpsters and delivery equipment. The contrast was stark and deliberate, a physical manifestation of the separation Victoria had enforced. Marcus stood in the alley with his daughter, looking back at the grand building with its glittering entrance, the sound of music and laughter drifting out from within. And he made a decision. He wasn't going to go inside through that entrance. He wasn't going to accept this relegation. Not for himself, because he had long since accepted that the world was unjust, that people made assumptions, that kindness was often rewarded with cruelty. But for Emma, for his daughter, who needed to learn that sometimes you had to stand up, that sometimes you had to refuse to accept the indignity that others tried to impose upon you. He turned to Emma and knelt down to her level, his hands on her small shoulders, his eyes meeting hers with a seriousness that made her understand this was important. "Listen to me, baby girl. What that lady said, what she thought about us, none of that matters. You understand? We didn't do anything wrong. We're good people and we belong anywhere we decide to be. Do you know why?" "Why?" Emma asked, her voice small and uncertain. "Because our character matters more than our clothes. Because who we are on the inside is more important than what anyone else thinks about us. That lady saw us and made a judgment without knowing anything about us. But you know what? That's her problem, not ours. We know the truth about ourselves. We know we're kind people. We know we're here for a good reason, and that's what counts. But Daddy, she said, I know what she said, sweetheart. She made assumptions about us based on how we look. She thought she could tell who we are just by looking at our clothes. That's not okay, and it says nothing about who we really are. It only says something about her. Do you understand? Emma nodded, though he could see the hurt still reflected in her eyes. He pulled her into a hug, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, and he sent a silent prayer to Susan, his wife, asking her to watch over them, to guide him through this moment, to give him the strength to do the right thing. They went back inside. Marcus didn't use the service entrance. He walked back through the service corridor, past the confused security guard, past the astonished faces of the kitchen staff, his hand holding Emma's firmly, his expression calm and determined. When he reached the main ballroom again, Victoria spotted him immediately, her face flushing with indignation, her hand actually opening her mouth as if to speak. "I thought I told you," she began, but Marcus simply shook his head and guided Emma to a table near the back of the ballroom, far enough away from the main action to be unobtrusive, but in the main room nonetheless. He wasn't making a grand gesture. He wasn't trying to draw attention. He was simply refusing to accept the boundary that she had tried to impose upon them. He helped Emma into a chair and sat beside her, keeping her close, not saying anything, just being present. His presence here was an act of quiet rebellion, a statement that he and his daughter deserved to be here just as much as anyone else. Emma was quiet but no longer trembling. She watched the proceedings with the careful observation that children possess, absorbing everything: the opulent decorations, the beautiful people, the complex social dynamics unfolding around her. Marcus could see her mind working, could see her processing what had happened, could see her beginning to formulate her own understanding of the world. "Daddy?" she whispered after a few minutes, tugging gently on his sleeve. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are we still supposed to be here?" Marcus put his arm around her and pulled her close. "Absolutely. This is exactly where we should be. You know why?" "Why?" "Because your mom believed in helping children, and that's what this event is about. It's about helping sick children. Your mom would have wanted us to be here to support that, and we belong here, Emma, just as much as anyone else in this room. Don't ever forget that." Emma seemed to take comfort in this explanation. She settled against her father's side, her small body relaxing slightly. Marcus noticed that some of the other guests were giving them sidelong glances, probably curious about who they were and why they had defied the coordinator's instructions. But Marcus ignored them, focusing instead on being present for his daughter, on providing her with the emotional support she needed to process this difficult moment. For over an hour, they sat there. The evening progressed. There was a silent auction, a presentation about the foundation's work, speeches from various donors and board members. Marcus paid attention to it all, genuinely interested in the cause they were supporting. The Children's Medical Foundation did important work that had changed the lives of countless children. The new pediatric wing had been built, and it was beautiful, and it represented hope for families dealing with childhood illness. He was genuinely glad to be there, even if his presence made others uncomfortable, even if he had to tolerate Victoria's disapproving glares from across the room. Then the mayor arrived. Mayor James Chen was a man in his 60s, with a presence that commanded respect, without any outward demonstration of ego. He entered through the main ballroom doors with several aides, and the room seemed to take notice immediately, though not in the obnoxious way that the wealthy guests sometimes demanded attention. This was genuine respect, earned through years of public service and genuine care for the community. The mayor was the kind of man who remembered the names of people who served him coffee, who stopped to talk to people on the street, who genuinely cared about making his city better. The mayor shook hands with board members, thanked several major donors, and then, quite suddenly, his eyes scanned the room and locked directly onto Marcus. There was a moment of stillness, a pause that seemed to stretch longer than it actually was, a moment in which Marcus felt seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time that evening. Then the mayor's face broke into a genuine smile, and he began walking across the ballroom toward Marcus, passing by tables of wealthy patrons without stopping, ignoring Victoria's anxious attempts to intercept him, moving with clear intention. The room was watching now, beginning to sense that something significant was about to happen. When he reached the table where Marcus and Emma were sitting, the mayor extended his hand without hesitation, his grip warm and genuine. "Marcus Hartley," the mayor said, his voice warm and genuine. "It's good to see you. I was hoping you would make it tonight." Marcus stood, and the handshake that followed seemed to transform the entire atmosphere of the ballroom. Around them, conversations halted. Phones came down. Eyes widened in confusion and growing realization that something significant was happening, something that contradicted everything that had been assumed about this man and his daughter just an hour earlier. "I'm honored to be here, Mr. Mayor," Marcus said, and his voice was steady and kind, just as it always was. The mayor glanced down at Emma, his expression softening with genuine warmth. "And who is this lovely young lady?" "This is my daughter, Emma," Marcus said, resting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Emma, it's wonderful to meet you. You know, your father is one of the most remarkable men I've had the privilege of knowing." Victoria had gone pale. She was standing near the entrance to the ballroom, her hand over her mouth, her carefully constructed understanding of the world tilting sideways. She had miscalculated. She had made an error in judgment. The mayor turned to face the room, still standing beside Marcus. His voice carried the kind of authority that comes with public office. And every person in the ballroom fell silent, leaning forward, waiting to understand what was about to be revealed. "I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone very special who is here tonight," Mayor Chen said. "Marcus Hartley has been a pillar of our community for over a decade. He served our country with honor and distinction in the military, protecting not just our nation, but earning commendations that most of us will never fully comprehend. He survived 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan, came home with injuries that most people would allow to defeat them, and instead chose to dedicate his life to serving his community. But more importantly, when he returned home, he didn't rest on his laurels or ask for recognition. He founded the Children's Medical Foundation's entire construction and renovation program with a personal donation of $12 million. He has personally overseen the construction of the new pediatric wing that will serve our city's children for decades to come. He has done all of this while raising his beautiful daughter as a single parent following the loss of his wife, while working with his own hands, while living with humility and grace that puts all of us to shame." The room had transformed. Where there had been whispers and judgment, there was now stunned silence. Where there had been dismissal, there was now visible shame on many faces. Several people were standing, seemingly frozen in the moment of revelation. Some had their hands over their mouths. Some had tears in their eyes. All of them were confronting their own prejudice, their own assumptions, their own failure to see beyond surface appearances. Victoria looked as though she might actually faint. "I'm ashamed that anyone in this room treated this man with anything less than the utmost respect," the mayor continued, his voice firm and unapologetic. "He is the reason we can celebrate what this foundation has accomplished. Marcus, thank you. Your service to this city, to our children, to our community, is immeasurable." There was a moment of profound silence, and then the ballroom erupted in applause. It was the kind of applause that held apology in it, that carried regret and new understanding. People who had whispered and judged were now clapping, some of them standing, their faces flushed, their eyes avoiding the reality of their own behavior. It was a moment of mass reckoning, a moment in which people confronted who they really were. Marcus remained standing, his hand on Emma's shoulder, his expression unchanged. He didn't gloat, didn't point to Victoria, didn't seek vindication in the way that lesser men might have. He simply accepted the applause with quiet grace, his free hand resting at his side, his face showing genuine humility despite the magnitude of what had just been revealed. Emma looked up at her father with pride in her eyes, understanding now that her father was important, that he mattered, that all the good things he did in the quiet of their home and in the community counted for something. She stood up and wrapped her arms around him, and he held her close, and in that moment, everything was worth it. Victoria approached him afterward, her carefully constructed facade crumbling, her expensive jewelry no longer making her feel superior. "Mr. Hartley, I didn't realize. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I had known—" Marcus held up a hand, not unkindly, but firmly. "You treated a single father and his daughter with disrespect, based solely on our appearance and your assumptions. That's what matters. Not whether you knew who I was, but how you would have treated anyone in our position regardless of their importance or net worth. That's the real issue." His words were gentle but firm, and they landed like truth. Victoria had nothing to say. She simply nodded, her face burning with shame, and she excused herself from the conversation. The rest of the evening unfolded differently. People approached Marcus with genuine interest and respect. Emma was offered compliments about her dress, was shown the dessert table and invited to select whatever she wanted, which turned out to be a large plate of chocolate desserts that she attacked with the enthusiasm of a child who had been offered unlimited ice cream. The mayor spent time with them, sharing stories and laughs, treating them not as tokens or objects of pity, but as genuine members of the community whose presence was valued and appreciated. As the evening was winding down, Emma sat beside her father in one of the comfortable chairs near the ballroom entrance, a small plate with remains of chocolate ice cream sitting on her lap, her head resting against his arm. She was tired, but happy, her small hand reaching up to take his. "Daddy," she said softly, looking up at him with those hazel eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. "Yes, baby?" "I think you're the best daddy in the whole world. I don't care what anybody else thinks." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. He leaned down and kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, grateful beyond measure for this moment, for his daughter, for the life they had built together through hardship and loss, and unshakable love. "I think you're the best daughter in the whole world, too," he whispered. Later that night, as he tucked Emma into bed, she asked him a question that contained wisdom, far beyond her years. "Daddy, why do people think that what you have is more important than who you are?" Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, considering his answer carefully, choosing his words with the attention he gave to everything involving his daughter. "I don't think they really do, sweetheart. I think sometimes people get confused. They see nice clothes and expensive things, and they think that's what makes someone important or worthy of respect. But the truth is, you could take away everything I have, and I would still be the same person. I would still be your daddy. I would still love you with all my heart. And that's what's really important." "So it doesn't matter if we don't have nice things like those other people?" Emma asked, her 7-year-old logic cutting right to the heart of the matter. "That's exactly right. We have each other. We have love. We have a home where we're safe and warm, We have the ability to help other people. Those are the things that matter. Money and fancy clothes are just things, sweetheart. They can be lost. They can be taken away. But who we are on the inside, how we treat people, how we love each other, that's real. That's permanent. That's what lasts. Emma reached out and patted his weathered hand with her small one. Good, she said, because you're the best exactly how you are, and Mommy would think so too. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Emma remembered her mother, remembered her wisdom, remembered her love, even though she had only been 4 years old when Susan passed away. That was perhaps the greatest gift his wife had left them. Not money, not status, but the knowledge that real love transcends death, that it lives on in memories and in the way you raise your children. She absolutely would, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Your mom would be so proud of you. She would be proud of how brave you were tonight, how you kept your head up even when someone was being mean to us. That takes real strength. She's still watching us, isn't she? Emma asked, the kind of simple faith that only children possess in their voice. I believe she is, sweetheart. I believe she's always watching over us, making sure we're okay. And I think tonight she was smiling, especially when you stood up and hugged me in front of everyone. Emma settled deeper into her blankets, her hand still holding his. I love you, Daddy. I love you more than anything in the world, Emma. More than anything. As Marcus left her room and walked downstairs to his modest house, he thought about the events of the evening. He thought about Victoria's cold dismissal, about the moment of humiliation in the service corridor, about Emma's confusion and hurt. He thought about the many people in the world who faced exactly this kind of treatment every single day. People who didn't have a mayor to walk in and vindicate them. People who simply had to find strength in their own character and dignity. People whose acts of kindness and generosity would never be publicly recognized, but mattered just as much. He thought about his late wife, Susan, who had been a nurse before the cancer took her, who had spent her entire life caring for people who were sick and afraid, who had believed in him even when the world didn't, who had taught him that kindness and integrity were worth more than any material possession. She had passed away 3 years ago, leaving him to raise Emma alone. And every day since then had been an exercise in showing his daughter that life was worth living, that people were fundamentally good, that the world was a place worth being part of, even when it treated you unfairly. That evening at the gala had been a moment of vindication, yes, but it wasn't vindication he had needed. He had known who he was all along. What he had needed was for his daughter to see that goodness was rewarded, that kindness mattered, that doing the right thing, even when nobody was watching, even when nobody would know, was worth it. The mayor had revealed the truth about his charitable work, his military service, his $12 million donation that had made the entire pediatric wing possible. But the real truth, the one that Marcus hoped Emma would carry with her for the rest of her life, was simpler and more profound. The quality of your character isn't determined by what you own, or what you wear, or what people assume about you when they first meet you. It's determined by how you treat others, especially when they're not treating you well. It's determined by the strength it takes to remain kind in the face of cruelty, to maintain dignity in moments of humiliation, and to never let anyone else's judgment make you question your own worth. As Marcus settled into his chair that night, looking out at the modest living room of his home, he felt a deep sense of peace. Emma was sleeping safely upstairs. Tomorrow he would go back to work, back to his construction job, back to the humble life he had chosen, because it allowed him to be present for his daughter, to be the kind of father he had always wanted to be, and that was enough. That had always been enough. The gala would become a story in the community, a tale of humility and revelation, of the important businessman who hid his importance behind worn flannel shirts and work boots. People would remember the mayor's speech, would talk about Victoria's shame, would use it as a lesson in not judging others. But what mattered most to Marcus was that Emma would remember it as the night her father showed her that standing tall in the face of injustice, choosing kindness in response to cruelty, and maintaining your own sense of worth when others tried to diminish you, those were the real victories. Those were the things that truly mattered. And as he closed his eyes that night, he felt grateful. Grateful for his daughter, for the community that had ultimately shown him respect, for the opportunity to do good work, and for the understanding that wealth and status and designer clothes and all the external markers of success were ultimately meaningless compared to the love he shared with his daughter and the integrity he carried in his heart. The back door had been an indignity, yes, but it had also been a test, and Marcus had passed it, not by revealing his wealth or his accomplishments, but by refusing to let it change who he was. That was the real vindication. That was the real lesson.